Welcome everyone to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager for HGA, and I'm your host today. Today's sponsor of Textiles and Tea is the Weavers Group of St. Louis in honor of their friend and fellow weaver, Laura Blumenfeld. We will take questions today, as always. We ask that you put the questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. It's kind of hard to see them when they're in the chat. We love your comments, though. Those are great. But if you would, put the questions in the Q&A. Today, we have Melissa English Campbell. Melissa's work has been exhibited internationally, including the Royal Albert Museum, the Tramway Gallery in UK, Seoul, South Korea, Como, Italy, Museum of Texas Tech University, the new Bedford Art Museum, and the Hedge Gallery. Melissa holds a Bachelor of Science degree from University of California, Davis, and a Master's in Fine Arts from Kent State University. She has had a career as a textile and fashion designer prior to starting her family, and later as an assistant professor at Kent State University. Melissa now works full-time in our Northeast Ohio studio, and you will see her work in the 2021 Small Expressions. Welcome, Melissa. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
We always start with the same question, which is, what is your favorite tea?
My favorite tea is Lapsang Souchong. Any strong black tea is great.
And what's the name of it?
Lapsang Souchong. It's a fermented black tea.
Ah,
Heaven.
I'll have to try that. We need to keep a list of all of our teas. So how did you get started in fiber?
So I came to it really young. My mother was a fiber arts major at University of Hawaii before I was born. And even though she didn't do any fiber art per se while we were growing up, she was pretty busy. She had her hands full with us. It permeated our lives. We all knew, what all our different fibers, if we were wearing a knit or a woven. And I thought that was just a life skill that everybody learned in their homes, like swimming or reading. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized that was maybe unique. And I had all of this back knowledge from my mom.
Oh, that's amazing. So you had an unusual childhood. I mean, you have lived a variety of places, you've traveled. Can you talk about your growing up and how did that impact you as an artist, do you think?
Well, let me start by sort of describing my early years, which were spent traveling quite a lot. So when I was just an infant, my parents were taking Monday night meditation seminars from someone in San Francisco called Stephen Gaskin. And at some point, he was invited to tour the US and give lectures on meditation. I believe it was meditation. And everyone who had been taking his classes, or a lot of people, decided to join him on the tour. And my parents were one of those people. And they took an old school bus and took out all the everything and turned it into a living space. And a whole caravan developed. And at every stop, a few more people would join the caravan. And at the time, I was the first baby on the tour. And then over time, more and more children were born or joined. And when the tour was over, the whole caravan settled in Tennessee and started a commune called The Farm. And my sister was born there in the school bus, and she was delivered by midwives, Anna Mae Gaskin and her team. And when I was about 4, my parents decided to move to the Netherlands and took my sister and I there. And first we moved into like a small tulip growing farming community village. And that was just such a shock to move from a hippie commune where they were purposefully shedding social norms and dogmas to an old ancient farming village in the Netherlands where they were all about social norms and structures. So learning the language, learning to be in a structured school instead of a hippie commune school, and that transition was probably my very first experience in that, like, this consciousness shift where you're in the backwoods of Tennessee, and then huge change in landscape, weather, behaviors from the adults. And then they moved to a big metropolis, to Amsterdam. So then we moved from a big country house to a little apartment. Instead of driving, we took public transportation. And by that point, my parents had 4 kids. So they needed help with childcare. And one of the things my father would do was drop me off at the Rijksmuseum while he ran his errands and took care of what he needed to that day. So I would spend the day walking the halls and watching people and the art, and avoiding the docents or making it look like I was with a group of people. And I don't know that he did it that often. It's just a really strong memory. So again, a big shift of, being alone, not having my adults with me in this big museum. And then, and I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but they joined a Sufi commune in Paris. So we lived in it was like a large mansion with a big grounds, and we would sleep in sleeping bags on the ground in this space. And then the Sufi commune had a contract to maintain one of the base camps on the Alps in Chamonix. So we moved there for a little bit. I remember that. And so then again, living in the Alps with the landscape going from this in Holland to this. And most everyone spoke French. So we were speaking, again, language change. And then, and I don't know, the next memory I have is living in London, in the Cockney area of London, where there was this, they were living in houses that were slated for demolition, but the UK law is strong on this point where if there's still a family in there, they can't. And so there was like a rotation of families. My family took a rotation, and we lived there. So back to English, but not real English, very strange English. And then back to the Netherlands. Then we moved back to the US, and eventually we kind of settled in Northern California. And so the short answer I usually give is I'm from California. We lived in Mill Valley in Marin County. And then when I was 16, I signed up for a work study boarding school situation in Israel. So we would take classes, work on a farm, and then we would also tour the country and see life as an Israeli. And one of those things would be living on a kibbutz or living in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, and then also going through basic training in the army. So, and again, another big contrast was moving from Northern California, this idyllic, misty redwood side of a mountain, to like the desert, extreme country, learning to take apart an Uzi and shoot an Uzi, not an Uzi, M16. And so again, a big shift, like a big contrast, moving back to California. And I think all of that influences my artwork in that I'm always after that kernel of setting rhythm and shifting it. and then having it play out into something new in the piece. And that is probably the constant in all of my work.
That is amazing. What some of the comments are, you need to write a book. What a great biography of what you've been through. I cannot imagine. And just, I guess you would be one of those people that can easily shift then, or at least you know how.
I think I just internalized it. I've watched movies where the storyline is about a big change in someone's life. And I often find myself waiting for the movie to start. Like, when is it going to have something interesting? You know, it just is like so common and normal that sometimes the movie will end and it feels like it never really took off. So I think I've just totally internalized it as that's the way life is.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, one of the things that I noticed about your weaving is that you have this very unique style. And these images that are coming up are from the series Painted Warp, I believe. And it shows just a snapshot of how your process works. Where did the idea come from to do these beautiful painted warps? And why did you pursue it?
When I was in my early 40s, I started grad school and I was exploring different avenues for self-expression. And I was, just getting a handle on all the options, taking a wide variety of courses. And mainly in the textiles department. I would think I entered through the textiles department, so felt, kind of loyal to that. And at some point, I had the idea of running the yarns. I was still finding a way to express myself, and I liked weaving, but I didn't see an opportunity for self-expression in it because there was such structure to it, and it didn't complete the story for me. So I had the idea of running it through a digital printer, the warp through a digital printer, and I would prep the warp and run it through, print my image, and then retie it back onto the loom. And it was okay, but it wasn't brilliant. And it really changed the image a lot to where I felt like I could just paint it and avoid all of this running it through the printer business. And so that's how the painting started for me. It was because I failed at something else. And then the other thing that happened with the printed warp was that the weaving process really flattened it. And so it was like a deflated version of what I wanted to weave. So I developed, or I didn't develop, I mean, it's an ancient structure. I came across this structure of the undulating squares, which for me was the equivalent of like looking in and out of windows, and the undulation created a dimensionality that had vanished from my image by weaving it. So I put the two together.
That's amazing. I think it's a miracle that you can paint a warp and it, probably reflects badly on my warping skills, that you can paint the warp and then put it back on, and when you weave it, it's still there.
I have found a way I don't have to cut it off the loom anymore. So I'm just pulling it onto a table, the wheels are turning on the loom. So to put it back, all I have to do is wind the back of the loom and it just goes right back to where it was.
So how did you get from science to art? Because you started out in science, right?
Actually, it was just the way the UC system is structured.
Okay.
It was environmental design in a Bachelor's of Science degree. So we had science courses, and design courses for the degree. And I'm not sure it's structured that way anymore. But at the time, yeah, we had to mix it. No, I didn't purposely go into science. Although I did take quite a lot of textile science courses, which, so yeah, I guess I did do a bit of science.
Well, I'm always amazed how many science backgrounds we get with the artist on the show. It seems to be a connection. That's why I was curious.
I see that connection because you have to have a hungry mind. You have to be searching, and you also have to be in pursuit of a method that is repeatable and but can also grow. So I think I see, yeah, there's a huge similarity.
Well, when I think of weaving and when you're being taught, you're taught it's over, under, vertical, horizontal. And you've talked some about this already, but I'm always struck by how your work flows. There's not that rigidity you see in some work. It's almost like you've taken on the most structured medium to produce this beautifully flowing work. And you've talked some about that, but could you talk more about getting that flow and why it was important to you? And I may not be using the right word when I say flow, but it's that, anyway, I'll let you finish.
I wonder if it's what I call the undulation of the pattern. And that is important to me because I feel like life is never still. And looking at artwork that is just a repetitive pattern, for me, I can't sink into it or look for the mysteries of the piece. I need some disruption to that, or I need a path I can follow within the work. And so that is in my work because that's what I look for in art. And it also helps me to find that that edge that I like to find between rhythm and disruption, and trying to make sense of what's happening in the work without making it super obvious. And so, yeah, it adds a little mystery, it adds movement. It really helps me to make the image have the presence, I guess, that I'm looking for in the imagery.
Well, your work is very interesting combination of opposites also, because we have this work called Janice, which is so colorful, so inviting. But we also have this other work that you did called the Honey Black and White. And it's kind of like an evolution, maybe, of your color to black and white to color. Can you say more about your use of color?
Sure, yeah. So the black and white piece, Honey, came out of that decision to try painting instead of digitally printing the warp. And what I realized, and what my images had in common, and what I was trying to paint onto the warp, was really the interaction of light that happens. And I wanted that translucence that you get from light and dark bouncing off each other. So I decided to distill it down to just black, gray, and white to I guess clear the noise and just really focus in on what it was I was interested in exploring. And it just having those really basic ingredients made it possible to explore that light movement, to explore that dimensionality. It almost helps you to create sort of a translucence, and so it was really all that I needed at the time. And then that ran its course, and I don't know, ready to add another element. I think because I started to see how color could be a whole other presence and not just a tool. And so then I returned to color as using it to create a presence within the work. And so I work with really soft shades that then build up into darker shades. And I also work with contrasting colors, so so that there's some vibration in there and a little bit of buzzing in certain areas. And then I also work with like analogous colors so that there's areas of rest and some stillness in the work because it can get very, very busy.
Well, the next couple of images that we're going to look at, when I first saw them, I thought they were woven, and then when I read about them, they're actually painted correctly. Right?
Actually, they are both.
Okay.
I painted the warp, and then I wove it. And so, but that's interesting because it's one of the few times where that these are translated from paintings that I had done. And again, the paintings were about shifts and trying to get a flow and then shift the painting. And then I tried it on the warp. So I had a period of time where I didn't have access to a loom. And that's when the paintings were developing. But it did feel like there was an ingredient missing. For some reason, for it to feel like it's working, I need the paint to be reacting to something or be acted upon by something. So when I finally had a loom again, this was the first thing I tried out. And again, you can see that they're sort of the paisley shapes, but they get shifted and they're responding to the movement that happens during the weaving process.
Now, are you okay with the shifting, or do you control that shifting of the warp, the alignment?
A bit of both.
A bit of both.
The shifting is not controllable. It's going to happen, but I can calculate it in such a way that it works within the piece. So I know it's going to happen. So that's that, it's going to happen. But I can't, because I know it's going to happen, it does let me, it does, I don't know how to say this, but I know there's going to be an element of movement. I don't know exactly how, or I sort of know where, but then when I do my painting, I can anticipate it a little. So there's a bit of both. There's a little anticipation and there's a little bit of just standing back and saying, yay, that worked.
Well, I'm going to kind of shift questions here. You were on faculty at Kent State for a while, right? So being a professor and having to deal with students or getting to deal with students, I could see that could either be a help or a hindrance in your own work. So how was your experience with that?
I found it initially to be a help. It really brought me out of myself. I'm an introvert. I tend to just put my head down and work. I don't pursue a lot of social engagements. So it pulled me out of myself, and I quickly had to develop the skills of communication and explaining. We have a fairly diverse student body, so all types of styles of communication, all types of personality dynamics. And so learning to kind of surf that and still get to a conclusion that needed to happen within the classroom. It taught me a kind of taught me a kind of surfing, I guess. I don't know. And it also it formalized. I've always been fairly detail oriented or organized, but it kind of, I for the first time really had to create formal systems. I had huge classes, and each semester well over 100 students to keep track of, and I created structures to keep everybody straight, and the assignments and the grading, and also I was still parenting kids. So that was good for me. It made me grow really fast. Towards the end, the pandemic started, and the things that kind of fed me, the collegiality, the collaboration, the connection with students, it kind of dissipated, got really stressful with, sorry. The students were really stressed, and so I would feel that from them. So trying to keep them on track, but not make it sound too serious so they didn't have too much panic, and writing that, plus also at home with my kids, I realized that to really give that my full attention would mean that there would be nothing left for the studio. And the students deserve that. They come to school with a passion, and I wanted them to be met with equally that passion. And I was just too split. So I made the choice to go full time into the studio.
Good for you. Big leap. Yeah. It's like going from Tennessee to Amsterdam, and then
yeah.
You do that. You just keep doing that.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I didn't see it that way, but yeah.
I saw that you're growing indigo. How is that going for you?
It's really cool. So there's this really cool fiber workshop in Cleveland called Praxis, and I believe you interviewed.
We did.
Jessica, right?
Yeah, Jessica Pinsky.
And I had a large commission about 3 years ago and no loom. So I found Praxis because I could rent time on a loom and work on the commission. And so I did that for 4 months about 3 years ago. And it was amazing. And I wished so badly that I could stay part of that community. Just the people who work there every day, the hobbyists, the students that zoom in and out, the energy is fantastic.
I bet.
But it's an hour away, and I still had responsibilities here, and teaching and the kids, and so I signed up for the newsletter. And when the call for indigo growers came out, I thought that would be a great way to be connected but not have the commute. And I'm one of 200 people who signed up, and I have 10 indigo plants, and it's the Japanese variety. They do better in Ohio. We have a lot of cloud covered, and I've had 2 harvests off it so far. And every week, Jessica sends out videos of what we should do this week with our little indigo guys. And so, yeah, I've had 2 harvests, and 1 more I can do, I think, if the weather holds. And then in September, we're all going to deliver our dried leaves to Jessica and Praxis, and that'll have been, at least have been connected to it that way. Yeah.
Well, I remember her talking about this, but I don't remember. Do you get dye from it? Do you get
as a thank you, all the growers can use the dye bath for one project. Yeah.
Will you be able to do that?
I have been thinking about what I would like to do. I learned shibori as an undergrad from Shinichi Arai, I believe what's their name. And I haven't done it since, and I'm gonna try and see if I can make a fabric, tie it all up and dunk it. That would be amazing.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah. Well, what was some of the best advice that you got and from whom?
Okay. I would say maybe just by example, but I feel like the elders in my family have always had hungry minds. They've never just settled. They've always pursued interests. My father is a photographer, and he's always pursuing the next technology and innovation in photography. I always remember my grandparents being very engaged in current events and staying current with the community. So I would say always be growing and be hungry for more information, more training, more, I don't know. I think it would be a shame to waste the time to stop growing. So yeah, I would say by example. I don't have like a memory of a deep conversation or a mentor saying, listen up.
Sit down, my child. I want to give you the meaning of life.
Yeah, but I would say I learned from paying attention that these seem to be the most contented adults. So I'll do it that way.
What an interesting life to experience. Oh, let's try this, or let's do this, or I just find that amazing. I mean, because you talk to some people and they come from an area where you're wasting your time. How dare you go into the arts kind of thing. So hurrah for your parents. That's wonderful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was, I'm not sure that I don't think anybody ever stood in my way. I think at one point my father was a little concerned and said, what about advertising? Because he saw a future in advertising. But at some point, I think he realized who he was talking to. I can't imagine anything else. Yeah.
Well, let me spin that question around then. What advice do you give to your students when they first start and they want to be an artist or an art student?
Well, it goes back to the never stop training yourself. And honestly, it doesn't end with undergrad. It doesn't end with grad. I'm always signed up for a class. At the moment, I have a class coming up in September for how to apply for public art installations through the Ohio Art Council.
Oh, wonderful.
And, Ohio is very supportive of the artists. The Ohio Art Council subsidizes like artist entrepreneur classes and does a biannual of Ohio artists. I've never been accepted into that show, by the way. But they are supportive of arts, and I'm really lucky to be in Ohio, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's where you landed, that of all the places that you lived, that you're in Ohio. Yeah. I'm from next door in Indiana, so yay Midwest.
That Indiana is on the way to Chicago. I know that much.
There you go. Well, one thing I was curious about, what is next for you? And I love that you take classes, because I feel like some of us apologize, like, oh, I'm just all over the place. I'm always taking a new idea. I'm always taking a new class. And it's nice to hear someone say, no, that's a good thing. Go take another class, Oh
my gosh, it's amazing. For a whole summer, I took a class on being an artist entrepreneur, and business owners came in and spoke to us about how they would like to interact with the artists. Business planners came in and talked about creating a business plan. I mean, even if you're a studio artist, having a business plan is really helpful. I would say definitely always be studying and learning.
Well, you got a shout out from someone about Kent State had an awesome textile department. So kudos to you. That's from Leslie Alperin. So she said, good job.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's next for you? What's next? on the
What's
line?
next? Sorry. I think that's what
No, I didn't ask you
originally.
that. What's next for you? I got sidetracked.
So I have work in 3 shows at the moment. One is at this Festival Center for the Arts, the Textile Fiber Arts International. So I'm going to travel out to California and see that show next week. And I have work you mentioned in Small Expressions, and that is in transit. It's a show that travels, and it's in transit. It just finished in Washington. It's on its way to Toledo, Ohio, and then it will go to Philadelphia and New York. And while it's in Toledo, I'm going to go visit it and maybe speak to the, I forget exactly, the curator there mentioned it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Whoever the support group is there for that gallery.
Oh, okay.
I have a collaboration going with another artist here in Kent, and she's not a fiber artist. She does pen and ink. And what's interesting about our collaboration is that she works intuitively and then imposes a grid pattern into the work. And I start with a grid pattern and then try to work against it and disrupt it. So we gave ourselves a year to create a body of work, of a collaboration. And then we're gonna pitch it to a gallery and see if we can get it shown.
Well, let us know about it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We want to
If there's
see
any
that.
gallery owners or curators listening, let
There
me
you
know.
go.
And then I have work in Australia at the moment. It's a group show, and it's the most amazing idea for a group show ever. It is a fiber artists making portraits of other fiber artists. And it's at Timeless Textiles, and Ann Kempton put together a virtual show of it because they're on lockdown right now,
Mhm.
quarantining, and just as the show opened. And she's done an amazing job of making that a great online experience with interviews, and you can virtually walk through the gallery. So
Now, is that still available for people to see?
yes, yes. So it's called, the show is called Ain't the Archies, which is a play on the Archies in Australia. I don't know if you
Oh,
know
right,
of
H
that.
the Archies. Okay, I saw that.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. So the Archies is this really prestigious portrait exhibit of all of Australia's best artists submit a portrait. And so her exhibit is called Ain't the Archies because it was meant to be exhibited side by side with it. I think the timing is off now again because of COVID, but
And it's Ain't.
Ain't the Archies.
Okay, I'm trying to post that. Sorry. I know it's just distracting, but I wanted to put that down there before I forgot. Well, we have some questions from the audience, so let's take some of those if that's okay. All right. Pamela Flatou, does undulating squares, when you talked about that at the very beginning, does that reference Joseph Albers' work?
Oh, I love Joseph Albers, and I read him while I was a grad student. I love what he writes about abstract art and basing it in something that people can connect to. And I have no idea. I mean, I don't think so. I did discover them probably within that same year that I was reading his work. But I think it was later in the year. I mean, who knows? It could be subconscious. I don't know.
It sounds good though. We'll go with it. Fazia Rizvi, I do terrible on these names, I'm sorry. I'm curious about the kind of looms you use, tapestry looms, or some of the pieces look like they were done on a draw loom.
No, it's all just a floor loom. I'm currently working on an AVL, which if anybody knows, has the sandpaper front apron bar, and it's chewing at my yarn. I've got to figure out a solution for that. It's just a floor loom. And I have a table loom. I have one that's just like the one behind you. and they're all exactly like that. I need a minimum of 16 harnesses. In a perfect world, I would have 20, but I need a lot of harnesses.
Well, what kind of, Nancy Riley wants to know, what kind of paint do you use to paint your warp?
I make a crazy slurry, and it has to do with what I'm working on and with and what I'm looking for. And I have all of the dyes, the Procyon, the fiber reactive. I even have some pigments, and I have inks, and I have thickeners. I even have put in a squirt of acrylic. I put in watercolor. I'm just after a certain reaction, a certain movement. Some of the yarns will just wick the color right away, and others, they resist it and fight me. So I have to make I'm like a witch. They're mixing my potion to break down the yarn's resistance. So it's a mixed bag. I can't say exactly.
Well, that's being very flexible. Oh, that doesn't work. Let's try this.
Yeah.
Well, Phyllis Shumluck wants to know, is there a structure? Are they all plain weave? Because it's really hard to tell from the pictures, but.
In a perfect world, it would be a disrupted satin weave, which is a wonderful pattern. But I don't have enough harnesses. So it's a really wonky, disrupted twill based on a satin weave.
You need to write a book. That's all there is to it. How to do weaving your own way.
Yeah.
Okay, hope that answered that question. After I get off here, I'm going to go look that up. How would you do a disruptive twill with a plain? Okay. Janet Finch wants to know, do you paint only the warp? Is it a warped face structure? And can you tell us what the warp structure is? So some of that we've already talked about. But.
Yeah, the warp structure, sorry, it's just making do with 16 harnesses. And again, in a perfect world, I would have a disrupted satin weave with a warp face satin. So I do paint all of the yarns. I don't know if it's possible to go back at all on the images, but all the yarns are all painted. And so even though you're only seeing parts of each painting, yeah, there's one, if you go back a little further, yeah, okay. So on the far right, I'm holding the 2 layers. So I paint each portrait twice for each layer. And you're looking at Janice there on the right, just being wound back onto the loom. And so the back of the weaving is not woven. I'm only weaving the face. And that is because if I weave both sides, then Janice's face would turn into like a lemon. Like if I was to paint a circle and then weave both sides, it would turn into a squashed circle. And I have compensated for that and like painted a really elongated portrait. But I'm also working kind of intuitively when I'm painting. And so I really like to actually have it in real shape and size while I'm painting. I just feel like I can respond better to the image. So I only weave the top. And I think that answers your question.
Well, she was curious also about the weft. I am too. What is your weft? Is it plain?
Mostly it's plain, or I do like a really modeled dunk it in watery dye and then model it so it's not flat, because the gradation within the weft really helps to create depth in the portraits. But recently have figured out a way to wind the weft so I can also paint the portrait on the weft, so that would be 3 images.
Oh wow.
On the weaving. So that's my next project.
Beth Ranch said, your gray valued weaving looks like the weft matches the changing values of the warp across the weaving. Did you dye the weft separately, and how did you know which values went where?
No, that is just white linen on top of a painted warp.
Okay.
And it balanced well.
Somebody's asking what paints that you prefer, but you just said whatever works, right? You kind of choose whatever works, or do you have a preference?
I like the Dynaflow a lot.
Okay.
So if you were going to go spend some money to try this, it is a great beginner product. So I highly recommend that.
Dynaflow. So if we Google Dynaflow, we'll find.
Yeah, if you go to Dharma Trading.
Oh, okay.
They have it under dyes. It's a liquid dye. It's all mixed for you. And you can just dip your paintbrush in there and paint right onto the warp or whatever fiber you're using. And you can water it down a lot. So you can make gradations from just one little bottle. The yarn does like to wick it, so it's hard to get detail with it. But if you're just starting out, it's just fantastic for that.
Joe wants to know, which fibers and weaves do you prefer? Do you weave cotton, or do you use silk, or?
I've done everything, and right at the moment I'm using Textile, and I love how it looks and behaves. But my loom is chewing it up. So I have to pick according to the tools I have that how they're interacting. So I'm going to put linen on there after this comes off. And
really?
Linen is better on the AVL, I think, because of the sandpaper. That actually works really well together. So for this loom, linen. For my little table loom, silk is lovely. It holds the tension really well. So it depends on the loom.
Jane Einstein wants to know, where can I find a list of places the Small Expressions 2021 will be? And I can answer that one. You want to go to the HGA website, and it lists all of the locations that Small Expressions is going to go. And then you can contact those places and find out about hours. And since with COVID, you never know what hours they're going to be. Also, as many as we can will be going to Convergence this summer, if they're able to attend. Do you scour the warp before painting it?
I don't. I actually scour it after I paint it. I have a wire brush for cleaning barbecues, and I scour because some of the things I put in the paint slurry are sticky. It kind of glues the warp to a solid fabric. So I take the wire brush and I kind of separate all the yarns before I wind it back.
Oh, everybody's giving you solutions to your sandpaper issue. Janet Stone says,
do I have access to the chat history?
Well, some of it's in the questions. Janet Stolnitz is saying you can get a cover from AVL to cover up your sandpaper. And then over here, Susan Nestel says you can wrap an apron around the sandpaper and use it as a tie in the bar. So
I have a little muslin on the ends because those were the yarns that were breaking first, but now I'm seeing pops in the center. And
okay, do you rinse the warp and let it dry before you wind it on and weave it?
I don't. I did a few times, and then I was like, oh, the colors run, the lighter colors get bled with darker colors, and then I just, a light bulb went off, and I was thinking, watercolorists don't wash their paper after they're done painting. And they were basically painting on rag cotton paper. So why am I rinsing this? And I do brush it, so I get all the extra flakes off of there. And it's been great. Ever since I made that decision, it's been really good.
Mimi Rhodes wants to know if you're painting the top layer. No, if you're weaving the top layer, what are you doing with the bottom layer?
The bottom layer is just waiting there, just waiting to pop up again to have its turn. It's just hanging out. I have dowels in the back of the loom that weight them, you know, because the top yarns are being used at a different rate than the bottom yarns while they're waiting to be incorporated. So these dowels just add tension to them while they're waiting, so that when it's their turn, they have the tension they need to be used.
So they do get woven in.
Oh, well, I mean, they have to be to create the checkerboard.
Right, right.
So yeah, I mean, I weave a top and then they go back and forth like this.
Almost like a double weave, but not really.
It is a double weave, but I don't weave, I don't put two passes for each pick. I only weave the top. So the back is unwoven warp. The top is the disrupted twill.
Oh, okay, I get it. Sorry. How often do you teach this?
I've never taught this. All my courses were in fashion. So I taught, you know, tailoring and construction and design process and theory of, yeah. So none of this, I've never had to teach this.
Would you want to? I mean, would this something you would want to go to a conference or a guild and teach it?
I think that could be interesting. I think it would have to be people who could thread the loom before the class started.
Oh, absolutely.
So that they were at least that much understanding. Then I could see that it could be really fun. I could see passing on some helpful information.
I see convergence 2024 in your future. I hope you'll come and teach. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Not like putting you on the spot there, is it?
A little bit.
Well, I'd come. I would just come if nothing else, just to watch how you do it.
Oh.
It says, your method makes me think of ECOT. I'm a newbie weaver. Do you ever do ECOT?
Oh, sure. Yeah. There's just no reason to do all that extra wrapping since I can control where the dye goes with a paintbrush. But I have done ECOT. But honestly, there's no point in what I'm doing.
All right. I think we got one more. Oh, Diane. I don't know how you say your last name. Do you know if we can see the back of your work? Oh, when it's at the art center out there. She lives out in California. I live 2 blocks away and haven't seen the show yet. I'd like to be able to see the back. They want to see the back of it.
I'm so sorry, but no. For me, that would be like sending it out in the world without its pants on. I think that's private, and I don't exhibit that.
Oh, sorry,
but
Diane.
If she needs a photo of that, I probably have some work that isn't stretched yet that I could show her what that looks like. It's not revolutionary. It's just warp that's not woven.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. This has been fascinating. You know, just when you think you know all the weave structures, you find something new. This has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And also thank you to the Weavers Guild of St. Louis and for sponsoring. And Kathy, what you're doing for the art community is amazing. I've enjoyed all of your interviews and it's been really enriching.
Thank you. HGA has done a good thing here, I think. And I have to say thank you to Whitney. She's my woman behind the scenes. You never get to see her, but she does all the work.
Thank you, Whitney.
If you want to see more of Melissa's work, and you do, go see it at her website. And she's got some interesting things there. You can see some of her older work, her newer work, see where she's going to be, where her exhibits are. She does a wonderful job of letting you know where her work's going to be. And her website is melissaenglishcampbell.com. And again, I do want to say a big thank you to the Weavers Guild of St. Louis for their kind and wonderful gesture of sponsoring Textiles and Tea in honor of Laura Bloomfeld. that's such a kind gesture. I'm sure her family really appreciates it too. So thank you. Weavers Guild of St. Louis. If you want to know more about them, they are at Weavers Guild of STL, St. Louis.org. And also, I just found out they are the second oldest guild in the US. So thank you, St. Louis. We appreciate that. If you would like to sponsor Textiles and Tea or your guild or your business, please go to our website, weavespindye.org. The information is on there and how you can also be a sponsor. Textiles and Tea is also generously sponsored by the Fiber Trust. If you would like to see more programming like this, and also the programming that we have coming up in the fall with the Spinning and Weaving Week, please support HGA by becoming a member or donating to the Fiber Trust or both. And you can do those at weavespindye.org. If you have missed part of this show today, and I'm sure you want to see it all, and you probably want to go back and watch it again, or if you want to share it with someone, all of the Textiles and Tea are recorded and they are on the HGA Facebook page. We are also putting them on the HGA YouTube. If you go on there and you subscribe, you will get a notice when a new one has come up on YouTube. So be sure you do that. Thank you all so much for being here this week. It was a great interview. Thank you, Melissa. It was wonderful to have you here. Next week, we have Joan Berner. And I hope you have a wonderful week and happy tea.